The private jet soared high above the clouds, its luxurious interior bathed in soft golden light. The hum of the engines was barely audible over the gentle melody of jazz playing in the background. Passengers lounged comfortably in plush leather seats, sipping on glasses of champagne or scrolling through their phones. It was a scene of opulence and calm, until one corner of the cabin began to stir with tension. In the first-class section, a young woman sat holding her baby. She wasn't dressed like most people who flew on this kind of plane. Instead of designer clothes or flashy jewelry, she wore a simple hoodie and jeans. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, and dark circles under her eyes hinted at sleepless nights. She looked tired but determined as she tried to soothe her crying infant. The baby's wails filled the otherwise quiet space, growing louder by the second. Some passengers glanced up from their books or laptops, visibly annoyed. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, trying not to make eye contact. But no one said anything, at least, not yet. The flight attendant assigned to this part of the plane approached cautiously. She had been working non-stop for hours, juggling requests from demanding travelers while keeping everything running smoothly. Today, though, felt especially long. Between dealing with last-minute catering changes and managing an overcrowded flight schedule, her patience was wearing thin. And now there was this crying baby that wouldn't stop. "Ma'am," the flight attendant said sharply, leaning down slightly so she could speak directly to the mother. "Could you please try to quiet your child? We have other passengers here who are trying to relax." The young woman looked up, startled. She nodded quickly and gave an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry," she murmured softly, adjusting the blanket wrapped around her baby. "He's just a little fussy today. I'll get him settled soon." But the apology didn't seem to satisfy the flight attendant. If anything, it made her more irritated. The baby let out another loud cry, echoing through the cabin. Passengers exchanged glances again, some rolling their eyes, others sighing, audibly. The flight attendant clenched her jaw, clearly losing what little composure she had left. "You need to do something about this," she snapped, pointing at the squirming infant. "Right now." The mother froze for a moment, taken aback by the sharp tone. Then, gathering herself, she replied calmly, "I'm doing my best. Babies cry. It happens sometimes. I promise I'll figure it out." Her words only seemed to fuel the flight attendant's frustration. Without thinking, without even pausing to consider the consequences, she raised her hand and slapped the mother across the face. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Everyone turned to stare, stunned into silence. For a few seconds, the only sound was the faint hum of the plane's engines. Even the baby stopped crying, wide-eyed and motionless in his mother's arms. The mother sat there, frozen, her cheek reddening where the slap had landed. Slowly, she looked up at the flight attendant, disbelief written all over her face. Her grip tightened protectively around her child as if bracing for another blow. But none came. Instead, the flight attendant stood there, her own expression shifting from anger to shock as she realized what she'd just done. Passengers whispered among themselves, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it. One man reached for his phone, discreetly recording the scene. Another woman shook her head disapprovingly, muttering something about professionalism. Meanwhile, the mother remained seated, her emotions swirling beneath the surface. There was hurt, yes, but also something else. A flicker of resolve. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire cabin seemed suspended in time, waiting to see what would happen next. Little did they know, this incident was about to take a turn none of them could have anticipated. The slap echoed in the cabin, sharp and shocking. For a moment, everything froze. The crying baby went silent, the murmurs of passengers died down, and even the soft hum of the plane seemed to fade into the background. The young mother sat there, her face stinging from the blow, her eyes wide with disbelief. She held her child tightly against her chest as if shielding him from further harm. The flight attendant stood frozen too, her hand still hovering midair, realization dawning on her face. Her cheeks flushed red, Not just from anger now, but from embarrassment and fear. What had she done? She hadn't meant to hit anyone. It was supposed to be a warning, a way to vent her frustration. But instead of intimidating the mother, she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, the mother placed her baby gently on the seat beside her. She straightened up, her posture stiffening. There was something different about her now, something that made the flight attendant take a step back instinctively. Gone was the tired, apologetic woman who had been trying so hard to calm her baby moments ago. In her place stood someone else, entirely confident, composed, and radiating quiet authority. "Do you know who I am?" the mother asked, her voice low but steady. It wasn't loud, but it carried through the cabin, cutting through the tension like a knife. Every passenger turned their attention toward her, curiosity mixing with apprehension. Even the flight attendant blinked, startled by the sudden shift in tone. "No," the flight attendant replied hesitantly, though her voice wavered. "And honestly, it doesn't matter. You need to control your child." The mother didn't argue or raise her voice. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather wallet. From it, she extracted a sleek identification card, embossed with a golden logo, a symbol instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with luxury aviation. Hartley Aviation. The name gleamed under the soft cabin lights, commanding respect. "I'm Evelyn Hartley," she said, holding the card up for everyone to see. Her voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it now. "And I own this aircraft." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Passengers exchanged glances, some leaning forward to get a better look at the ID card. Others whispered among themselves, piecing together the implications of what they were witnessing. One man muttered, "Wait, the Evelyn Hartley, as in, the billionaire who runs half the private jets in the world?" Evelyn ignored them, keeping her gaze fixed firmly on the flight attendant. The poor woman looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her face drained of color and her hands trembled visibly. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. All she could do was stare at Evelyn, her mind racing to process the enormity of her mistake. "You will hear from my legal team shortly," Evelyn added, tucking the ID card back into her wallet. Her tone left no room for negotiation. This wasn't a threat. It was a promise. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The flight attendant took a shaky step backward, then another, until she stumbled into the aisle. She glanced around desperately, hoping someone might come to her defense, but all she found were accusing stares. Some passengers shook their heads, in disapproval, while others simply looked away, unwilling to get involved. Evelyn, meanwhile, returned to her seat and picked up her baby. She cradled him close, brushing a strand of hair off his forehead. Despite the chaos that had unfolded, he seemed perfectly content now, gurgling softly, as if nothing unusual had happened. Evelyn smiled faintly, her expression softening as she focused on her child. But beneath that tender moment lay a storm of emotions: anger, hurt, and a simmering determination to set things right. As the reality of the situation sank in, whispers erupted throughout the cabin. Phones were pulled out discreetly, cameras capturing footage of the aftermath. Someone posted a photo online within minutes, tagging Hartley Aviation's official account and sparking a flurry of comments. By the time the plane touched down, the story had already gone viral. Back in the cockpit, the pilots exchanged uneasy glances. They knew exactly who Evelyn Hartley was, not just because of her wealth, but because of her reputation. She was known for being fair but firm, always expecting excellence from those who worked for her. If word got out about this incident, and it inevitably would, it could spell disaster for the company. Meanwhile, the flight attendant retreated to the galley, trembling uncontrollably. She leaned against the counter, gripping its edge for support, as tears streamed down her face. How could she have been so reckless, so careless? She replayed the scene over and over in her head, each time cringing at her own actions. It wasn't just her job on the line anymore. It was her entire career. By the time the plane landed, news outlets were buzzing with reports of the confrontation. Social media exploded with hashtags like Doc Justice for Evelyn and Fire the Attendant. People debated passionately, some siding with the mother, others defending the flight attendant. But amidst the noise, one thing was clear: this incident wouldn't be forgotten anytime soon. As Evelyn disembarked, surrounded by flashes of cameras and shouted questions from reporters, she kept her composure. She didn't stop to give interviews or make statements. Instead, she walked straight to her waiting car, her baby nestled securely in her arms. Once inside, she let out a deep breath, finally allowing herself to process everything that had happened. Her husband, sitting beside her, reached over and squeezed her hand. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Evelyn nodded, though her jaw tightened slightly. "I'll be fine," she said after a pause. "But this isn't over yet." And she was right. While the immediate drama might have subsided, the fallout from the incident was only beginning. Legal teams were already drafting letters, PR departments scrambling to manage the narrative. Yet despite the whirlwind surrounding her, Evelyn couldn't shake off the memory of the flight attendant's terrified face. There was something about it that lingered in her mind, gnawing at her thoughts long after the plane ride ended. The moment Evelyn stepped off the plane, her life transformed into a whirlwind of chaos. Reporters swarmed the tarmac, microphones thrust toward her face, cameras flashing like strobe lights. Questions came at her from every direction. What happened on the flight? Are you pressing charges? How does it feel to be slapped by someone who works for you? Evelyn didn't answer any of them. She simply walked past, her head held high, her baby cradled protectively in her arms. Her husband followed closely behind, shielding her from the crowd as best he could. But even inside the safety of their car, Evelyn couldn't escape the storm brewing outside or within herself. Back home, the news spread faster than wildfire. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people praised Evelyn for standing up for herself, calling her a role model for women everywhere. Others criticized the flight attendant's behavior, labeling her unprofessional and reckless. Memes mocking the incident flooded timelines, turning what should have been a private matter into public entertainment. But not everyone sided with Evelyn. A vocal minority argued that slapping anyone, no matter how frustrated you were, was unacceptable. They questioned why a billionaire would fly incognito instead of traveling with proper support staff. Wasn't she asking for trouble by blending in with regular passengers? The debate raged on, dividing opinions and sparking heated arguments online. For the flight attendant, things went from bad to worse. News outlets dug into her past, uncovering details about her employment history and personal life. Anonymous sources leaked stories about her temper, painting her as someone who frequently clashed with colleagues and customers alike. Whether these claims were true or exaggerated didn't matter. Once they hit the internet, they stuck. Her employer, Hartley Aviation, acted swiftly to distance itself from the controversy. Within hours of landing, she was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Colleagues avoided her, fearing association might tarnish their own reputations. Even friends hesitated to reach out, unsure of what to say or whether they'd be dragged into the spotlight too. Alone in her small apartment, the flight attendant replayed the events over and over in her mind. She saw Evelyn's shocked expression, heard the collective gasp of the passengers, felt the weight of her own trembling hands as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. Tears streamed down her face as she scrolled through social media, reading hateful comments directed at her. Strangers called her names, mocked her appearance, and demanded she lose her job permanently. It was overwhelming, a tidal wave of judgment crashing down on her without mercy. Meanwhile, Evelyn found herself caught in a different kind of turmoil. On one hand, she appreciated the outpouring of support from strangers who rallied behind her. Messages poured in from people praising her strength and resilience. Many shared their own experiences of being mistreated by service workers, thanking her for bringing attention to the issue. But on the other hand, the constant scrutiny left her exhausted. All she had wanted was a quiet flight home. Instead, she became the center of a global spectacle, her every move dissected and analyzed, Her husband urged her to press charges. "You can't let this slide," he said firmly during dinner one evening. "If you don't hold her accountable, it sends the wrong message." Evelyn nodded absently, pushing food around her plate. She knew he was right, legally, morally, professionally, but something held her back. Deep down, she understood how stress could push people to their breaking points. Running a multi-billion-dollar empire meant dealing with immense pressure, daily. She'd snapped at employees before, though never physically. Still, she recognized the signs of someone stretched too thin. That night, unable to sleep, Evelyn wandered into her home office. She sat at her desk, staring at the stack of legal papers waiting for her signature. Filing charges against the flight attendant would be easy. It was practically expected of her. But as she picked up a pen, hesitation gripped her. What would happen to the woman if she did? Would firing her solve anything? Or would it only perpetuate the cycle of anger and resentment? Her thoughts drifted to her own mother, a kind but firm woman who always emphasized forgiveness. "People make mistakes," she used to say. "It's how they learn and grow." Those words echoed in Evelyn's mind now, mingling with memories of late-night conversations where her mother encouraged her to lead with compassion rather than vengeance. By morning, Evelyn had made up her mind, not entirely, but enough to take the next step. She instructed her legal team to halt any immediate action against the flight attendant. Instead, she requested a private meeting with the woman. No cameras, no reporters, just the two of them face to face. When the invitation arrived, the flight attendant nearly collapsed with relief. After days of isolation and fear, she saw this as her only chance to salvage her dignity, and possibly her career. With trembling hands, she accepted the offer, knowing full well that walking into Evelyn's penthouse office might very well mean walking out unemployed. On the day of the meeting, the flight attendant dressed carefully, choosing professional attire that conveyed respect and humility. She arrived early, escorted by a nervous-looking assistant who led her to a sleek conference room overlooking Manhattan. The view was breathtaking, but she barely noticed. Her heart pounded in her chest as she waited, rehearsing apologies in her head. Finally, Evelyn entered the room. Gone was the casual hoodie from the flight. Today she wore a tailored blazer and trousers, exuding authority without saying a word. Yet when she spoke, her tone was softer than the flight attendant expected. "Thank you for coming," Evelyn began, gesturing for the woman to sit. "I wanted to speak with you privately because I believe misunderstandings deserve clarity." The flight attendant swallowed hard, nodding. "Thank you for seeing me," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I made a terrible mistake. I'm so sorry." Evelyn studied her for a moment, noting the redness in her eyes and the tension in her shoulders. "Tell me," she said gently. "Why did you do it? Why did you hit me?" The question hung in the air, heavy with expectation. The flight attendant hesitated, searching for the right words. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked with emotion. "I don't know," she admitted. "I was frustrated, overwhelmed. I've been working long hours, juggling multiple jobs just to make ends meet. That day, everything felt like too much. And then your baby started crying." She trailed off, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "It wasn't about you or your child. It was about me losing control. I swear I've never done anything like that before. I'm so ashamed." Evelyn listened, silently, her expression unreadable. She saw the sincerity in the woman's eyes, the raw vulnerability beneath the polished exterior. For a brief moment she imagined herself in the same position, stressed, exhausted, pushed to the brink. Would she have reacted differently? After a long pause, Evelyn leaned forward slightly. "I understand frustration," she said quietly. "Running a company isn't easy. Raising a child isn't easy either. We all have moments where we lose perspective, but actions have consequences. You need to understand that." The flight attendant nodded vigorously. "I do," she whispered. "Please, tell me what I can do to make this right." Evelyn considered her response carefully. This decision wouldn't just affect the woman sitting across from her. It would set a precedent for how Hartley Aviation handled similar situations in the future. Compassion needed to balance accountability. "We'll discuss options," Evelyn replied finally. "But first, I want you to promise me one thing, that you'll use this experience to grow, to become better, not just as a professional, but as a person." The flight attendant promised, her gratitude evident in every word she spoke. As she left the office later that day, she carried more than just hope. She carried a second chance and the responsibility to prove she deserved it. The meeting between Evelyn and the flight attendant ended on an unexpectedly hopeful note. For the first time in days, the woman felt a glimmer of light breaking through the suffocating darkness that had consumed her life. As she stepped out of Evelyn's penthouse office, the crisp Manhattan air hit her face and she took a deep breath, something she hadn't been able to do since the incident. But hope didn't erase reality. The weight of what she'd done still pressed heavily on her shoulders. She knew forgiveness wasn't enough. She needed to prove herself worthy of it. Evelyn had offered her two choices: resign quietly or accept a transfer to a ground-based role within Hartley Aviation. It was a lifeline, but one that came with conditions. The new position would require her to undergo mandatory training programs, including conflict resolution and stress management workshops. Additionally, she'd have access to mental health resources provided by the company. For the flight attendant, the decision was clear. Resigning meant walking away not just from this job but potentially from any future opportunities in aviation. Accepting the offer, however, gave her a chance to rebuild, not just her career, but also her sense of self-worth. She chose the latter, without hesitation, grateful for the opportunity despite knowing the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Back at Hartley Aviation headquarters, whispers about the incident lingered like a shadow over the workplace. Employees tiptoed around the topic, unsure whether discussing it openly was safe. Some sympathized with the flight attendant, acknowledging the immense pressure frontline staff often faced. Others condemned her actions, insisting that professionalism should never waver, no matter how stressful the situation. Evelyn, meanwhile, found herself reflecting deeply on the broader implications of the incident. While she appreciated the support from colleagues and the public, she couldn't ignore the systemic issues it exposed. Flight attendants were stretched thin, working long hours under demanding conditions with little room for error. Passengers sometimes treated them as servants rather than human beings, adding another layer of strain to their already challenging jobs. Determined to address these problems head-on, Evelyn called an emergency meeting with her executive team. Sitting around the polished mahogany table in the boardroom, she laid out her vision for change. "We can't keep expecting perfection from our employees when we're not giving them the tools they need to succeed," she said firmly. "This isn't just about one person. It's about creating a culture where mistakes are learning opportunities, not reasons for punishment." Her words resonated with the team, many of whom had witnessed similar incidents firsthand. Together, they brainstormed initiatives aimed at improving workplace conditions. These included increasing staffing levels on flights, implementing flexible scheduling to reduce burnout, and launching anonymous feedback systems so employees could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Most importantly, they agreed to prioritize mental health support, partnering with experts to provide counseling services and wellness workshops. As news of these reforms spread throughout the company, morale began to shift. Employees who had initially feared backlash now felt a renewed sense of trust in leadership. They saw Evelyn's response to the incident not as leniency, but as a commitment to fostering a healthier, more compassionate work environment. For the flight attendant, starting fresh in her new role proved both challenging and rewarding. Her days were now spent coordinating logistics on the ground instead of navigating tense interactions mid-air. Though the transition was daunting at first, she quickly discovered a passion for problem-solving behind the scenes. Whether it was ensuring catering orders arrived on time or resolving last-minute scheduling conflicts, she approached each task with determination and focus. The training programs turned out to be transformative. Through workshops on emotional regulation and effective communication, She learned strategies to manage stress and handle difficult situations calmly. Counseling sessions helped her unpack years of bottled-up frustration, allowing her to confront personal challenges she'd ignored for far too long. Slowly but surely, she began to feel like herself again, a version of herself she liked better. Colleagues noticed the change almost immediately. Gone was the short-tempered, defensive woman they once knew. In her place stood someone patient, empathetic, and eager to collaborate. When passengers occasionally complained about minor inconveniences, she responded with grace and understanding, earning praise from supervisors and coworkers alike. Word of her transformation reached Evelyn, who made a point to check in periodically. During one such visit, she stopped by the flight attendant's desk unannounced. "How's it going?" she asked warmly, leaning against the edge of the workstation. The flight attendant looked up, surprised but pleased to see her. "It's going well," she replied, smiling genuinely. "I'm still learning, but I feel lighter, you know? Like I'm finally doing something meaningful." Evelyn nodded approvingly. "That's good to hear. Remember, growth takes time. Don't rush yourself." Their conversation lasted only a few minutes, but it left a lasting impression on both women. For Evelyn, it reinforced her belief in the power of second chances. For the flight attendant, it served as a reminder that redemption was possible, even after making a catastrophic mistake. Outside the company, public opinion remained divided. Some praised Evelyn for her compassion and leadership, hailing her as a trailblazer in corporate accountability. Others criticized her decision, arguing that leniency undermined authority and set a dangerous precedent. Social media debates raged on, with hashtags like "Our Second Chances Matter" competing against "Iron Accountability First." Despite the mixed reactions, Evelyn refused to let criticism dictate her actions. She understood that true leadership meant making decisions based on principles, not popularity. By choosing forgiveness over retribution, she hoped to inspire others to adopt a more empathetic approach to conflict resolution. Her husband, watching from the sidelines, marveled at her ability to remain steadfast amidst the chaos. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony overlooking the city lights, he remarked, "You've handled all of this with so much grace. Do you ever regret not pressing charges?" Evelyn thought about it for a moment before shaking her head. "No," she said softly. "Not everything has to end in punishment. Sometimes people just need guidance and a chance to prove they can do better." Her words stayed with him long after the conversation ended. He realized then that Evelyn's strength lay not in her wealth or influence, but in her capacity to see humanity in everyone, even those who wronged her. Months passed, and life returned to a semblance of normalcy. The flight attendant continued, thriving in her new role, earning promotions and accolades for her dedication. Evelyn, meanwhile, focused on expanding the reforms across other divisions of Hartley Aviation, determined to create lasting change. Yet neither woman forgot the events that brought them together, or apart. For Evelyn, the slap served as a reminder of the complexities of human nature and the importance of leading with empathy. For the flight attendant, it became a turning point, a catalyst for growth and self-discovery. In the end, the incident wasn't just about a single moment of anger or forgiveness. It was about connection, the messy, imperfect ways we navigate relationships, mistakes, and redemption. And while the world may never fully agree on whether justice was served, one thing was certain. Both women emerged stronger because of it. This expanded version dives deeper into the aftermath of the meeting, exploring the personal growth of the flight attendant, Evelyn's leadership philosophy, and the ripple effects of their decisions on the company and beyond. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding other parts. Months had passed since the infamous incident on the private jet, and life for both Evelyn and the flight attendant had settled into a new rhythm. The media frenzy had died down, replaced by newer headlines and fleeting scandals. But the impact of that day lingered in subtle ways, on the policies within Hartley Aviation, on the lives of those involved, and on the broader conversation about accountability and second chances. For the flight attendant, Every morning began with a quiet moment of gratitude. She'd sit by her kitchen window, sipping coffee while watching the sunrise paint the sky, in hues of orange and pink. Those early hours were precious, a time to reflect on how far she'd come and remind herself not to take anything for granted. Her new role as a ground operations coordinator wasn't glamorous, but it gave her stability and purpose. More importantly, it allowed her to rebuild her confidence piece by piece. Her days were busy, filled with tasks ranging from coordinating catering deliveries to troubleshooting last-minute passenger requests. At first, she worried that former colleagues might judge her or treat her differently because of what happened. To her relief, most people welcomed her warmly. They saw her efforts to improve and respected the humility she brought to her work. Over lunch breaks, she even started forming friendships with coworkers who shared similar struggles. These connections reminded her that she wasn't alone, that everyone carried burdens they didn't always talk about. One afternoon, during a particularly hectic shift, a delayed flight caused chaos at the terminal. Passengers grew restless, complaining loudly about missed connections and lost luggage. Tensions escalated quickly, and one irate traveler snapped at her, accusing her of incompetence. For a split second, old instincts flared up. Her jaw tightened and her hands clenched into fists. But then she remembered the lessons from her training. Taking a deep breath, she maintained her composure and responded calmly. "I understand your frustration," she said, meeting the man's eyes. "Let me see what I can do to help." By the end of the day, she managed to resolve the issue, earning an apology from the same passenger who had insulted her earlier. As she walked home that evening, she felt a surge of pride, not just for handling the situation professionally, but for proving to herself that she could rise above her past mistakes. Evelyn, too, found herself reflecting often on the changes sweeping through Hartley Aviation. The reforms she implemented had taken root, transforming the company culture in meaningful ways. Employees reported feeling more supported and valued, which translated into better service for passengers. Customer satisfaction ratings soared, and industry insiders began praising Hartley Aviation as a model for progressive workplace practices. But Evelyn's journey wasn't without its challenges. Critics continued questioning her decision to give the flight attendant a second chance. Some stakeholders argued that leniency undermined discipline and set a risky precedent. Others accused her of using the incident as a publicity stunt, claiming her actions were motivated by image rather than genuine concern for employees. Evelyn listened to these criticisms without letting them shake her resolve. She understood that leadership meant making tough choices, even when they weren't universally popular. What mattered most to her was staying true to her values. Every time she visited different departments or spoke directly with staff members, she saw proof that her efforts were making a difference. Employees thanked her for prioritizing their well-being, and many shared stories of how the new initiatives had improved their lives. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late at night, after putting her baby to sleep, Evelyn would sit in her study, staring out at the city skyline. She wondered if she'd done enough, if the changes she spearheaded would endure once the initial excitement wore off. Sometimes, guilt gnawed at her. Had she been too soft, too harsh? Could she have handled things differently? On one such evening, her husband joined her in the study, sensing her unease. "You've done everything you can," he said gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "No decision is perfect, but yours came from the right place." His words comforted her, but they also sparked a realization. Leadership wasn't about achieving perfection. It was about striving for progress, even when the path was uncertain. With renewed determination, Evelyn decided to keep pushing forward, focusing not on critics but on the people benefiting from her choices. As weeks turned into months, the bond between Evelyn and the flight attendant evolved into something unexpected. Mutual respect. Though their interactions remained professional, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared acknowledgement of the lessons learned and the growth achieved. One chilly autumn afternoon, Evelyn received a handwritten letter slipped under her office door. Curious, she opened it and began reading. Dear Ms. Hartley, I hope this note finds her well. I wanted to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to start over. This experience has taught me so much, not just about my job, but about myself. Before, I thought success meant never showing weakness or asking for help. Now, I know it means being willing to grow and change, even when it's hard. Because of your kindness, I've been able to turn my life around. My daughter is thriving, in school, and I finally feel like I'm providing her with the future she deserves. Please know that I'll spend the rest of my life paying it forward, to my family, to my coworkers, and to anyone else who needs support. Thank you for believing in me. The letter ended with a simple signature, a grateful employee. Evelyn read it twice, her throat tightening with emotion. She hadn't expected such heartfelt gratitude, nor had she anticipated how deeply it would resonate with her. It reminded her why she chose forgiveness over punishment, that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion could create ripples of positive change. She carefully folded the letter and placed it in a drawer alongside other mementos from her career. Then she picked up her phone and sent a quick message to HR. Make sure we continue supporting employees like her. People deserve second chances, and third ones, if necessary. Meanwhile, the flight attendant continued thriving in her role. Her performance earned recognition from supervisors, leading to a promotion that surprised even herself. For the first time in years, she felt hopeful about the future. On weekends, she volunteered at a local community center, mentoring young adults interested in aviation careers. Sharing her story helped her heal further, reinforcing the idea that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. Passengers noticed the difference too. Where once they encountered a stressed, defensive flight attendant, they now interacted with someone warm and approachable. Many left glowing reviews, unaware of the personal journey behind the transformation. Though their paths rarely crossed anymore, Evelyn and the flight attendant remained connected through the ripple effects of that fateful day. Both women carried scars from the incident, but they also bore reminders of resilience, empathy, and the power of human connection. Their story became a testament to the fact that even in moments of conflict, there is potential for growth, redemption, and understanding. And so, as the seasons changed and life moved forward, neither woman forgot the lessons they'd learned. For Evelyn, it was a reminder to lead with compassion. For the flight attendant, it was a promise to never stop striving, to be better, for herself, for her daughter, and for the people whose lives she touched along the way. The months following the incident brought a quiet transformation, not just for Evelyn and the flight attendant, but for everyone touched by the events on that fateful flight. Life had moved forward, as it always does, yet the ripple effects of their choices continued to shape lives in ways neither woman could have anticipated. For Evelyn, the experience became a cornerstone of her leadership philosophy. She often found herself reflecting on how one moment, a single slap, had revealed so much about human nature, accountability, and the power of forgiveness. It wasn't just about what happened on the plane. It was about how people responded afterward. The reforms she implemented at Hartley Aviation weren't perfect solutions, but they sparked meaningful conversations within the company. Employees began speaking openly about stress, burnout, and mental health without fear of judgment. Managers started prioritizing empathy alongside efficiency, recognizing that happy employees created better experiences for passengers. Evelyn's decision to offer the flight attendant a second chance inspired similar initiatives across other industries. News outlets occasionally revisited the story, framing it not as a scandal but as an example of compassionate leadership. Business conferences invited Evelyn to speak about fostering resilience and accountability in high-pressure environments. At first, she hesitated. Public speaking wasn't her favorite activity, but eventually she agreed. Standing on stage, microphone in hand, she shared her journey candidly. "I've made mistakes," she admitted during one talk. "We all have. What matters isn't avoiding failure, it's learning from it. When we choose compassion over punishment, we create space for growth. and that benefits everyone. Her words resonated deeply with audiences, many of whom approached her afterward to share their own stories of redemption or struggle. Some thanked her for validating their experiences. Others asked for advice on handling difficult situations. Evelyn listened patiently, offering guidance where she could. Each interaction reinforced her belief that leadership was about connection, not control. For the flight attendant, life took on a new rhythm. Her promotion came with increased responsibilities, but also greater confidence. She no longer dreaded going to work, knowing she was part of a team that valued her contributions. The workshops and counseling sessions had taught her tools to manage stress effectively, allowing her to approach challenges with clarity rather than frustration. At home, things improved too. With a steadier income and more predictable hours, she spent quality time with her daughter, helping her with homework and cheering her on at school events. Their bond grew stronger, filling gaps left by years of financial strain and emotional distance. On weekends, they explored parks, museums, and farmers markets together, creating memories neither would forget. Volunteering at the community center remained a highlight of her week. Working with young adults reminded her of her younger self. Eager, but uncertain, full of dreams yet weighed down by doubts, she encouraged them to pursue careers in aviation, while emphasizing the importance of resilience and self-care. Many participants looked up to her as a role model, unaware of the rocky road she'd traveled to get there. One evening, after a particularly rewarding session at the center, she received a call from Evelyn's assistant. The billionaire wanted to see her, not because of any problem, but simply to check in. Nervous but honored, she accepted the invitation. When she arrived at Evelyn's office, she found it unchanged, sleek, modern, and bathed in soft light. Evelyn greeted her warmly, gesturing for her to sit. "How are things going?" she asked, genuinely interested. "Better than I ever imagined," the flight attendant replied, smiling. "Thank you again for believing in me. I wouldn't be here without your support." Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "It wasn't just my decision. You earned this opportunity through hard work and determination. Don't forget that." They talked for nearly an hour, discussing everything from workplace reforms to personal goals. By the end of the meeting, the flight attendant felt a renewed sense of purpose. Leaving the office, she realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of anger. It was about building bridges toward a brighter future. Back in the public eye, debates about the incident slowly faded into the background. Social media still buzzed occasionally with mentions of Tauquater second chances matter versus accountability first. But the arguments lacked their earlier intensity. Instead, people focused on broader discussions about workplace culture and mental health. Influencers and activists cited Evelyn's actions as examples of progressive leadership, urging companies to adopt similar practices. Even critics softened their stance, acknowledging that change often required bold steps, even unpopular ones. Hartley Aviation thrived under Evelyn's guidance. Passengers praised the improved service, noting how staff seemed happier and more attentive. Behind the scenes, employees credited the reforms for reducing turnover rates and boosting morale. Awards rolled in, celebrating the company's commitment to innovation and humanity. Yet Evelyn remained humble, attributing success to collective effort rather than individual brilliance. Privately, however, she allowed herself moments of pride. Watching her baby grow into a curious toddler reminded her of the importance of nurturing potential, not just in children but in adults too. Every bedtime story, every lullaby carried echoes of lessons learned aboard that turbulent flight. Sometimes, as she tucked her child into bed, she whispered, "We're all works in progress, sweetheart. Always remember that." Years later, when the incident resurfaced in interviews or retrospectives, both women spoke about it with grace and perspective. Evelyn described it as a turning point, a reminder that even billionaires make mistakes, and that true strength lies in vulnerability. The flight attendant framed it as a lesson in humility and perseverance, proof that redemption is possible if you're willing to fight for it. Their paths rarely crossed anymore, But when they did, there was always a nod of acknowledgement, a silent understanding of the journey they'd shared. They weren't friends exactly, but they were connected by something deeper, the knowledge that their choices had shaped not only their own lives, but countless others. In the end, the story of the slap wasn't just about anger or forgiveness. It was about growth, the messy, imperfect process of becoming better versions of ourselves. For Evelyn, it reinforced her belief in leading with heart. For the flight attendant, it offered a second chance to rewrite her story. And for everyone else, it served as a reminder that even in moments of conflict, there's potential for connection, healing, and hope. As planes soared above the clouds, carrying passengers to destinations near and far, the legacy of that day lived on, in policies and relationships and in the quiet resolve of two women who chose to rise above bitterness and embrace possibility.